Boston, 1895. The gaslit streets of Beacon Hill gleamed with autumn rain as Dr. Eleanor Hayes climbed the narrow steps to her modest apartment above an apothecary shop. At 30 years old, she was one of only a handful of female physicians in all of Massachusetts, a distinction that had cost her dearly in terms of social acceptance. "Good evening, Dr. Hayes," called Mrs. Wilson from her parlor window, her tone carrying that particular blend of respect and pity reserved for unmarried women of a certain age. "Working late again, I see." "The clinic was busy today," Eleanor replied, managing a polite smile despite her exhaustion. She had spent the past 12 hours tending to the poor in the North End, her small medical practice serving those who could not afford the fashionable doctors on Commonwealth Avenue. Inside her apartment, Eleanor removed her hat and loosened the severe bun that society deemed appropriate for a woman in her profession. In the mirror, she examined her reflection with the same clinical detachment she applied to her patients. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent dark eyes, a generous mouth that smiled too rarely. Not beautiful, perhaps, but handsome in a way that suggested character rather than mere prettiness. 30 years old, she murmured to her reflection, unmarried, unfashionable, and apparently unmarriageable. The words of her mother's letter, received that morning, still stung. "Your younger sister Catherine is expecting her third child. When will you abandon this foolish medical pursuit and accept that a woman's place is in the home? You grow older each day, Eleanor. Soon it will be too late entirely." Too late, as though life itself had an expiration date for women beyond which happiness became impossible. A knock at her door interrupted these melancholy thoughts. Her landlady stood in the hallway, her expression troubled. "Dr. Hayes, there's a gentleman downstairs. He says his mother is taken ill and requests your immediate attendance. He has a carriage waiting." Eleanor's professional instincts overrode her fatigue. "Tell him I'll be down directly." 5 minutes later, she found herself in an elegant carriage beside a well-dressed young man whose anxiety was palpable. "Thank you for coming so quickly, doctor," he said as the carriage lurched forward. "My mother collapsed during dinner. Our family physician is away in New York, and I didn't know where else to turn. Your name was recommended by the pharmacist." "What are her symptoms?" Eleanor asked, her mind already cataloging possibilities. As they drove through the darkening streets toward Back Bay, where Boston's wealthiest families made their homes, Eleanor gathered the medical history she would need. The carriage finally stopped before a magnificent brownstone mansion, its windows ablaze with light. "Here?" Eleanor asked, surprised. This was far grander than the typical households that sought her services. Inside, she was ushered through marble halls hung with priceless paintings to a sumptuous bedroom where an elderly woman lay propped against silk pillows, her breathing labored. But it was the man standing beside the bed who captured Eleanor's attention, stealing her breath more effectively than any medical emergency. He was perhaps 35, tall and lean, with the kind of patrician features that belonged in a portrait gallery. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his formal evening clothes rumpled, as though he had been running his hands through his hair in distress. But it was his eyes that held her, storm gray and intelligent, filled with genuine concern for the woman in the bed. "Doctor," he said, his voice deep and cultured, "thank God you've come. My mother, Mrs. Sterling, she cannot catch her breath." Eleanor moved to the bedside, her professionalism overriding her awareness of his presence. For the next 20 minutes she examined the patient thoroughly, asking questions in her calm, authoritative voice while the two men watched anxiously. "It is her heart," Eleanor announced finally. "Not an attack, but a weakening. She needs rest, a specific tincture I can prepare, and absolutely no excitement or stress." She turned to face the younger man directly for the first time. "Your mother will recover, but she must follow my instructions precisely." "Anything," he said with evident relief. "Whatever you prescribe, doctor. I am Alexander Sterling, and this is my brother James. You have our deepest gratitude." Eleanor recognized the name immediately. Alexander Sterling was one of Boston's most celebrated figures, a composer whose symphonies had premiered in Vienna and Paris, whose genius was spoken of in reverent tones throughout the musical world. He was also, according to the society papers, the most eligible bachelor in New England, pursued by every ambitious mother with a marriageable daughter. And here she stood in her plain black dress and practical shoes, looking every inch the spinster physician society believed her to be. "I will return tomorrow to check on Mrs. Sterling," Eleanor said, maintaining her professional demeanor. In the meantime, she should rest quietly. No visitors, no excitement. "Of course," Alexander replied, "but surely you must stay and take some refreshment after rushing here. It's the least we can offer." "That's not necessary." "I insist," he said with quiet authority. "James, please ask Mrs. Cooper to prepare a tray for Dr. Hayes." 20 minutes later, Eleanor found herself in an elegant drawing room, accepting tea from one of the most famous men in Boston. The situation felt surreal, as though she had stepped into someone else's life entirely. "Tell me, Dr. Hayes," Alexander said, settling into a chair opposite her. "How did you come to practice medicine? It cannot have been an easy path for a woman." Eleanor stiffened slightly, prepared for the usual condescension or barely concealed disapproval. But his expression held only genuine curiosity. "I was fortunate," she replied carefully. "My father was a physician. He believed women were capable of more than society typically allows. When he died, he left me enough to attend the Women's Medical College in Philadelphia. And then you returned to Boston to practice among the poor." It wasn't a question, and Eleanor wondered how he knew this. "Someone must tend to those who cannot pay fashionable prices." "A noble calling," he observed, "though I imagine society has not been kind about your choices." Eleanor met his gaze directly. "Society is rarely kind to those who deviate from expected paths, Mr. Sterling, but I suspect you understand something of that yourself." A smile flickered across his features, transforming them from merely handsome to something more compelling. "Music is more socially acceptable than medicine, at least for a man, though my mother had hopes I would pursue law or banking instead. And yet you followed your passion regardless." "As did you," he replied softly. "A quality I find admirable, Dr. Hayes." The conversation that followed flowed with unexpected ease. They spoke of Boston's beauty, of art and science, of the changing times they lived in. Eleanor found herself forgetting her usual guardedness, drawn out by Alexander's evident intelligence and the way he listened, truly listened, as though her thoughts mattered. "You must think me terribly forward," he said eventually, "but I wonder if you might permit me to call on you. Not professionally," he added quickly, "but socially. I should very much like to continue our conversation." Eleanor stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Mr. Sterling, I don't think you understand. I am 30 years old, unmarried, and entirely unsuitable for the kind of social circles you inhabit. Your reputation—" "My reputation," he interrupted gently, "is my own concern, as is my choice of company. I've spent years surrounded by society's approved companions, Dr. Hayes, empty conversations with emptier minds. This evening, speaking with you, I have felt more intellectually alive than I have in months. Surely that is worth pursuing." "People will talk," she warned. "People always talk," he replied with a dismissive wave, "particularly about me. Let them. The question is, would you permit it?" Eleanor searched his face for mockery or hidden motives and found none, only that steady, intelligent gaze that saw her not as a spinster to be pitied, but as a person worthy of interest. "Yes," she said finally, "I would permit it." His smile was radiant. "Excellent. Then I shall call on you tomorrow, after you have seen my mother. If that would be convenient?" As Eleanor rode home in the carriage Alexander insisted on providing, she felt as though reality had tilted on its axis. Could the most celebrated man in Boston truly be interested in her company? Or was this merely gratitude for treating his mother, a momentary kindness that would fade with morning's light? Yet when she examined the evening with the same analytical mind she applied to medical diagnoses, she could find no false notes in Alexander's manner, no condescension or pity. Only genuine interest and a warmth that had nothing to do with her profession and everything to do with her. Foolishness, she told herself as she prepared for bed. A man like Alexander Sterling does not court women like me. But the small, hopeful voice in her heart whispered otherwise. The following morning, Eleanor returned to the Sterling mansion to find Mrs. Sterling much improved and Alexander waiting with evident eagerness. "She's responding well to the treatment," Eleanor reported after her examination. Continue the tincture, and she should make a full recovery. Excellent news, Alexander said warmly. And now, might I prevail upon you to join me for a walk? The weather is fine, and I should like to show you something. They strolled through the public garden, then along the Charles River, their conversation picking up where it had left off the night before. Alexander proved to be an excellent companion, knowledgeable about history and art, but also genuinely interested in Eleanor's medical work. You speak of your patients with such compassion, he observed as they paused on the Longfellow Bridge, watching sailboats glide across the water, as though each one matters deeply to you. They do, Eleanor replied simply. In medicine, as in music, we have the privilege of touching people's lives intimately. How could I not care? Alexander studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. You are unlike anyone I have ever met, Dr. Hayes. Eleanor, if I may? Yes, she said softly, touched by the request. Eleanor, he repeated as though savoring the name. I wonder if you would allow me to continue seeing you, not merely as a friend, but as something more. Alexander, she began, her practical nature reasserting itself. You must consider what you're saying. I am 30 years old, firmly on the shelf by society's reckoning. You could have your choice of any young woman in Boston, beautiful debutantes from distinguished families. I don't want any young woman in Boston, he interrupted, his voice firm. I want you, Eleanor. Your intelligence, your passion for your work, your courage in defying society's expectations. These are the qualities I find compelling, not youth or conventional beauty or aristocratic connections. But the scandal, she protested weakly. Will die down eventually, he assured her. Eleanor, I have lived my entire life according to society's expectations, except for my music. I chose composition over law, yes, but in every other respect. I have been the dutiful son, the proper gentleman, always conscious of my reputation and position, and I have been miserable in it. He took her hand gently, mindful of the passers-by on the bridge. Then I met you, and for the first time in years I felt truly alive. Your mind challenges mine. Your dedication inspires me. Your presence brings me a peace I have never known. How can I turn away from that because society might disapprove? Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. You barely know me. Then allow me to know you better, he urged. Give me the opportunity to prove that my regard is genuine, that age and convention mean nothing compared to true connection. Looking into his earnest gray eyes, Eleanor felt her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. For so long she had told herself that love was not for her, that her path lay in service and solitude. But here was this extraordinary man offering her something she had thought forever beyond her reach. Yes, she whispered, yes, I will. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Eleanor had experienced. Alexander proved as good as his word, calling on her regularly, escorting her to concerts and exhibitions, engaging her in conversations that ranged from medicine to music to philosophy. He attended one of her free clinics and was visibly moved by her work, later composing a piece inspired by the strength and dignity he witnessed in her patients. Of course, society noticed. How could it not when Alexander Sterling, the most sought-after bachelor in Boston, was openly courting a 30-year-old spinster physician? The gossip was immediate and merciless. I heard from Mrs. Cabot that it must be some sort of strange gratitude, her landlady reported one evening, for treating his mother. Surely it will pass. Perhaps she has some hold over him, suggested another neighbor. Medical knowledge can be used for manipulation, they say. Eleanor heard these whispers, felt the curious and often cruel stares when she appeared with Alexander in public. But his steady presence beside her, his obvious pride in her company, made the gossip bearable. They don't understand, he said one evening as they attended a concert together, aware of the many eyes upon them. They cannot conceive that I might genuinely prefer your company to that of empty-headed girls whose only accomplishment is looking decorative. I am hardly decorative, Eleanor replied wryly. Alexander turned to her with such intensity that her breath caught. You are beautiful, Eleanor. Perhaps not in the conventional way society prizes, but to me, you are exquisite. Your intelligence shines in your eyes. Your compassion softens every feature. Your strength lends grace to everything you do. I have never met a more beautiful woman. As summer turned to autumn, their relationship deepened. Eleanor discovered that Alexander was more than the celebrated composer society knew. He was thoughtful and kind, passionate about his art, but also deeply committed to using his influence for good. He organized benefit concerts for charitable causes, supported young artists, and championed reforms in music education. And he loved her. That fact became increasingly clear in his every word and action, in the way he sought her opinion, valued her work, supported her aspirations. One evening in October, as they walked through the Boston Common where they had first strolled months before, Alexander stopped beneath an ancient elm tree, its leaves turned gold by autumn's touch. "Eleanor," he began, taking both her hands in his, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. You have shown me what true partnership can be, what it means to be with someone who challenges and inspires me, who sees beyond the composer and the reputation to the man beneath." He dropped to one knee, and Eleanor's heart began to thunder in her chest. "I know society will think this match peculiar," he continued. "I know there will be those who question my choice, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Eleanor Hayes, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" From his pocket he withdrew a ring, a simple but exquisite sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, deep blue like the twilight sky above them. Eleanor looked down at this remarkable man kneeling before her, offering her a future she had never dared imagine. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, "yes, Alexander, I will marry you." As he rose and drew her into his arms, as his lips found hers in a kiss that promised forever, Eleanor felt the last of her doubts dissolve. She had spent 30 years being told she was too old, too unmarriageable, too devoted to her career to find love. But she'd been wrong. Or rather, society had been wrong. Love had found her not despite her age and accomplishments, but because of them. Alexander loved her for exactly who she was, a dedicated physician, an intelligent woman, a person of substance and worth. Their wedding 6 weeks later was a modest affair by aristocratic standards, held in the small church where Eleanor's father had been baptized. Yet it was filled with genuine warmth, attended by Alexander's family and friends, Eleanor's patients and colleagues, and everyone who had come to understand that this was no scandal, but a true love match. As they stood at the altar, exchanging vows in voices steady with certainty, Eleanor caught her mother's eye in the congregation. The older woman was weeping, but her tears were of joy rather than disappointment. "I pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared, and the church erupted in applause. At the reception held in the Sterling Mansion gardens, now brilliant with autumn colors, society's initial skepticism had transformed into reluctant admiration. The couple's obvious devotion to each other was impossible to dismiss or mock. "They make a remarkable pair," Eleanor overheard Mrs. Gardner say to her companion. "I confess I had my doubts, but one cannot deny the genuine affection between them." "And did you hear?" her friend replied. "Alexander has composed a new symphony in her honor. He calls it The Healer. It premieres next month in New York." As evening fell and guests danced beneath strings of lanterns, Alexander drew Eleanor aside to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy, Mrs. Sterling?" he asked, using her new name with evident pleasure. "Beyond anything I imagined possible," she replied honestly, "though I shall continue my practice if you have no objection." "Object?" he laughed. "Eleanor, your work is part of who you are. I would never ask you to abandon it. In fact, I hope you might consider expanding your clinic. I have property in the North End that would be perfect, and the means to support your work." Eleanor felt her eyes fill with tears again. "You would do that?" "I would do anything for you," he said simply. "You have given me everything, Eleanor. Your love, your partnership, your extraordinary self. Supporting your calling is the least I can do." As they stood together in the garden, watching their guests celebrate, Eleanor reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her here. At 30, she had been considered past all hope of love or marriage, consigned to spinsterhood by a society that measured worth in youth and conformity. But she had found something infinitely more valuable than society's approval. She had found a partner who saw her true worth, who valued her mind and her heart, her age and her experience, her dedication and her dreams. "I love you, Eleanor," Alexander murmured, drawing her close. "And I love you," she replied, resting her head against his shoulder, "more than I ever thought possible." In the mansion above them, Mrs. Sterling watched from her window, smiling with satisfaction. When her son had first announced his intention to court the unmarried physician, she had been shocked. But Eleanor had won her over quickly, with her intelligence, her kindness, and most importantly, with the way she made Alexander truly happy. The following spring, as Boston's gardens bloomed with new life, Eleanor stood in her expanded clinic, treating patients in a bright, well-equipped space that Alexander had helped her create. The practice had grown beyond her wildest dreams, serving hundreds of people who had previously gone without medical care. And in the evening, she would return home to find Alexander at his piano, composing music that spoke of love and partnership, of finding light in unexpected places. Their life together was not without challenges. Eleanor continued to face skepticism from some colleagues who disapproved of her marriage, believing she should have chosen either career or family. And Alexander occasionally encountered raised eyebrows when he spoke proudly of his wife's medical accomplishments. But they faced these challenges together, their bond only strengthening with each passing season. One evening, as they walked along the Charles River at sunset, Eleanor reflected aloud on the journey that had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "choosing me over someone more conventional, more socially acceptable?" Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Eleanor, I regret only the years we missed before we met. Every day with you has been a gift. You are my partner in every sense, the person who makes me want to be better, do better, create better. How could I possibly regret that?" "I am 32 now," she continued, voicing the fear that sometimes still haunted her. "Growing older." "As am I," he replied with gentle humor. "And I find I love you more each day, not less. Your age doesn't diminish your worth, Eleanor. It enhances it. Every year has shaped you into the remarkable woman you are." He pulled her close, mindful of the early evening strollers around them. "We found each other when we were ready, when we had lived enough to recognize true value. I wouldn't change a single moment of our story." As they continued their walk through the historic city, hand in hand, Eleanor felt profound gratitude wash over her. She had learned that love has no expiration date, that worth cannot be measured by society's narrow standards, and that the most beautiful chapters of life often come when we least expect them. At 30, she had been mocked for being unmarried, but she had found something far more precious than society's approval. She had found authentic love with a man who valued her completely, a partnership built on mutual respect and genuine connection. And that, she realized, was worth waiting for. Dear listener, perhaps you too have felt the weight of society's expectations, the pressure to achieve certain milestones by certain ages. Perhaps you've been told subtly or overtly that opportunities for love, for happiness, for new beginnings diminish with time. But Eleanor and Alexander's story reminds us of a profound truth. Authentic connection recognizes no timeline. The experiences you've gathered, the wisdom you've earned, the person you've become through living, these are not limitations but gifts. They prepare you to recognize and appreciate real love when it arrives. Your journey is your own, unfolding in its perfect timing. The relationships that matter most often come when you have lived enough to truly value them, to bring your whole authentic self to the connection. Tonight, as you rest, know that your story continues to unfold in beautiful, unexpected ways. You are not defined by society's arbitrary deadlines. You are defined by your courage, your authenticity, your willingness to remain open to possibility. Sleep well, knowing that love, real and true, can find you at any age, in any season. Your worth is unchanging, recognized by those with wisdom to see it. With deepest appreciation, the legends of the Fall team. Thank you for journeying with us through Eleanor and Alexander's story. If their love touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and share this tale with those who need reminding that it's never too late for happiness. Your support inspires us to continue sharing stories of love, courage, and the triumph of authentic connection over society's narrow expectations.